Hi, I'm Jeff Dial, and welcome to another edition of Footprints in American History. Today, we will be discussing Samuel Chapman Armstrong, a man who had an extraordinary dream with extraordinary results. Once you hear his story, I am sure you will agree. Samuel Chapman Armstrong was born to missionaries in Hawaii in 1839. He lived there until age 21 when he decided to attend Williams College in Massachusetts. He graduated in 1862 at a time the Union Army was experiencing many defeats on southern battlefields far away. Armstrong volunteered to serve and began recruiting a company in upstate New York. Shortly afterward, the young captain became one of 12,000 men captured at Harper's Ferry, West Virginia. A few months later, he was paroled and returned to duty on the front lines where he saw the battle at Gettysburg and where he helped protect Cemetery Ridge from Pickett's ill-fated charge. It wasn't long after this that Armstrong was promoted to lieutenant colonel, where he was given command of the 9th Regiment of U.S. Colored Troops, whose commander had been wounded in combat. It was at this point that he and his men became more involved in battles, distinguishing themselves every time. That's because Armstrong knew if his colored troops were going to gain the respect of their white counterparts, they were going to have to be better. He trained them rigorously, and they proved themselves in places like Petersburg and Appomattox, as well as on the Mexican border in Texas. Once again, Samuel Armstrong was promoted, this time to brevet general. He spent some time at Camp Stanton, Maryland, where he decided to found a school to educate the young black soldiers, most of whom had never been taught before. Shortly after the war, Armstrong also became a representative of the Freedmen's Bureau. He also became leader of a large camp of former slaves in Hampton, Virginia, where he felt a burden for his African-American brothers and sisters who had no skills, no education, and no means to support themselves. So in 1867, he convinced a private investor and the American Missionary Association to buy some land and create a school. A year later, the Hampton Normal and Industrial Institute opened their doors. Using much of what he had learned from his father and life experiences, Armstrong had ideas he felt would help the fledgling school survive. First, he saw the reality that the newly freed slaves faced. The American Civil War had been bloody, especially in Virginia, where thousands of Confederate lives had been lost and the prospects of Reconstruction were foreboding. Farmers and people in the cities now had to rebuild their lives and find a sense of normalcy. Now that the slaves were free, they were certain to face resentment from their white counterparts. No longer bound to their masters, they now had to find a way to put food on the table, especially if they had children or a spouse. What whites were going to hire the people they now resented? Armstrong felt that the family would give his new students a chance at success, so he allowed the school to be coeducational so the married students could learn together. And his task was daunting. Few African Americans had any schools whatsoever, little money, and no guidance whatsoever. To make it worse, a slave rebellion in 1831 caused Virginia and many other southern states to pass legislation that prevented teaching slaves and free blacks any reading or writing skills. Overcoming illiteracy was going to take time. Finding philanthropists and former abolitionists to help out was part of the challenge. Creating stability was of extreme importance, and the former slaves knew the hardships of putting food on the table and providing shelter. As W.E.B. Du Bois put it, quote, "The black man felt his poverty without a cent, without a home, without land, tools, or savings. He had entered into competition with rich, landed, skilled neighbors. To be a poor man is hard, but to be a poor man in a race of dollars is the very bottom of hardships." End quote. This is where Armstrong decided that the way for the school to succeed was to teach them how to work and do manual labor to support themselves while in school, which is why they were required to work in either school shops or on the school farm. Many people who saw this were critical, believing the former slaves were only good for manual labor, not teaching, which is the principle that Armstrong decided would be the emphasis of the New Hampton School. However, since the school had no endowments, the manual labor enabled the students to pay for their schooling. It should also be noted that most Southern schools were lucky to survive 6 months, so the combination of manual labor and giving the students the skills to teach gave the fledgling school the foothold it needed to last. For Armstrong and the people working to ensure the school would succeed, teaching the African American students the ability to teach others was crucial. Armstrong himself spent 25 years working to ensure the students would have a chance. The goal of the school was simple: help former slaves work while learning to become teachers. In turn, these graduates would teach others the skills they had learned. In fact, to be considered for admission, a student had to enter with the intentions of teaching career after graduating. While at the school, they also learned English, science, arithmetic, history, including what they did know of African history and geography. And this teaching plan worked. 84% of the first 20 graduating classes who attended the Hampton Normal and Agricultural Institute became teachers. Perhaps the most famous alumnus arrived in 1872. Looking ragged, Booker T. Washington was afraid he would be rejected by the school. However, when people saw his work ethic, they realized he was worth a chance. And he soon caught Samuel Armstrong's vision for the school. After graduating and time at Wayland Seminary, Washington returned to Hampton, where he became an instructor himself. From there, Washington was recommended by Armstrong to become principal of a newly formed school in Alabama. Today, that school is known as Tuskegee University. But it was the efforts of these two men that inspired philanthropists and many former Union officers to join in helping the black community with education and trade skills. At one point, by the 1930s, they had created over 5,000 schools. Many of them had originally focused on things like basic job skills, industrial training, and teaching, as well as literary skills, ended up becoming accredited universities. Some of these students even became doctors and lawyers, and even a few politicians. This benefited Hampton because many members of the Virginia General Assembly helped the school with funding, and the vision became greater for Armstrong. In 1878, he created a program that allowed Native American students to join the school. Soon after, indigenous students from Virginia, the western states, and U.S. territories came to attend, and these students proved themselves worth the effort also. Because of the success at Hampton, Armstrong was awarded a LL.D. from both his alma mater, Williams College, as well as Harvard University. Unfortunately, the success of Hampton Normal and Agricultural Institutes came with a price. With increasing diversity and size, it soon became clear that the school needed greater finances to keep the doors open. Samuel Armstrong found himself unable to spend time with students and staff that he loved. He was forced to find more donors and philanthropists. He spent more time traveling and less time in Hampton, where he wanted to be. To make matters worse, racial attitudes of the time made it harder to advance the black race, so the school was forced to focus more on trade school programs and fundraising. The stress of trying to keep the school afloat finally caught up to the former Union general. In 1892, Samuel Chapman Armstrong suffered a debilitating paralysis while speaking in New York. On May 11, 1893, he suffered a second stroke, which cost him his life. He was interred at the school cemetery as per his request. Today, the school we just discussed is now Hampton University with an enrollment of roughly 5,000 students. The school is part of the Big South Conference and is one of the most famous of the historically black colleges and universities. Okay, I wanted to relate to you a personal experience with Hampton University, is what they call it now. Back in 1982, I was just starting college. I had just graduated high school, so I ended up at a community college there in Hampton, and I decided I wanted to take an ROTC course. Now, the way it worked with this school was you got credit for ROTC, but you actually had to take it at a second campus. So that was fine with me. And so this is a little bit awkward story for me. I think I would have done things a little different back now as opposed to back then. So anyway, what happened was I signed up for ROTC. They told me you're going to have to go to Hampton Institute to take the course. And so I go there. And what happened is that for me, it was a little bit different going to a university that was so predominantly black. It didn't bother me being a minority. I had gone to my sophomore year, I'd gone to a high school that was mostly black, and that didn't even faze me. So that wasn't a big deal. It was a little unusual for me how it felt being the only white student in class. I kind of understood now what it would have been like for a black student to go to an all-white school. So it was a different experience for me, but like I said, it didn't bother me. And in actuality, the students that I met were wonderful. They were absolutely wonderful. I am convinced that those students in that ROTC class that I took at Hampton Institute probably went on to become some of the finest officers in the United States Army. That is my honest belief. And you know what was really great was they were very disciplined, the way they ran that program. They did every Thursday at 5:30 in the morning. Anybody that knows me knows I am not an early riser, and the same was true even back then. But 5:30 more in the morning every Thursday, we would do this physical training there, and I'd have to get up and get there by 5:30 a.m. to do this PT. And I actually end up loving it. It was actually a wonderful experience, including rappelling off a 20-foot wall. Now, I had never done something like that. I had done something on a rope of Dry River Crossing, but I had never rappelled off a wall. And I got to be honest, if you've never done it, it's a really cool thing. I recommend it. And I will state this also for the record that Mr. Macho here, a year later, I ended up at Old Dominion University, and I had a chance to rappel again at ODU, but this was a 25,000 seat stadium, and this wall was the side of the stadium, and it was at least 100 feet in the air. Mr. Macho here chickened out. My friend Rowena, she went on the wall. She had a great time. I felt like a big chicken. Kudos, Rowena. So, getting back to the university, to Hampton University. So, I'm there, and what happened was during my time there, I did enjoy it. I was learning a lot from the ROTC class that I was taking there. However, I didn't really have any friendships at Hampton. I really didn't. I didn't know any of the students. So toward the end of my time that first semester, one of the things I learned was that there was a nearby college that I had a lot of friends at. And they had an ROTC program there, and the community college that I was taking my classes at had never given me the option of Hampton University or this other school, which I would have taken the other school because even though I didn't know too many people in the ROTC program, I did know one or two. At least I had friends at the other school. So that was kind of the attitude I had, and I was a little irritated. So what happened was I went to the instructors at the end of the semester, and I told them, look, I like this class, but I really want to take it at this other college. And being the only white student in that class, I remember looking at these two instructors, both of which were white guys also. I could see heartbreak in their eyes, absolute heartbreak that I was leaving the program. So what happened was, come January, I'm now taking ROTC at this other school. Now, I was only there one day. And what happened was I went there. Now, this is not a knock on the other school because I'm sure students that went to that other school might be watching. And what it was, it just, I should have given them maybe more of a chance. So I get there to this other school and I'm looking around the class, and what's happening is, I looked at how they dressed. I was listening to their conversations, and the conversations kind of along the lines of, well, did you go to that party this weekend? Did you do that? And just the way they dressed, it was a little bit different atmosphere than it was at Hampton. Now, again, this is not a slight on the other college because I really should have stayed a little bit longer and given them more of a chance. But I didn't because of that impression. I had remembered my time at Hampton University and how professional those students were and how they ran that program. So, like I said, it's not a slight on the other school, but because of that impression that I had being at this other school, I really ended up just dropping the program and leaving. So, what's my point that I'm making of this? One is that, this is a history lesson. And what I want people to do is learn lesser known history, because you can't really know where you're going until you have an idea where you've been. And Samuel Chapman Armstrong, he had a dream. He had a dream because what happened was he saw these former slaves and these Native Americans later on that they had virtually no prospects, especially these former slaves that were living in the deep South. Now, as far as the Native Americans, some of them came from as far away as probably California. I know that a lot of them did come from western states, but all over the United States, but especially in the South, with the Confederates just losing the war and a lot of things like that. These people were probably not only feeling defeated, but probably a little bit angry that they had to give up their slaves. So what happened was you have these people that had no skills whatsoever, and they had to find a way to support themselves. So he had a dream of doing something to help them teach each other how to make a living and how to get ahead in life and how to do something. And in my opinion, I'm very impressed with this person, because his dream is kind of what I'm following in a way, because I want people to take an interest in history. I want people to take an interest in knowing that you can dream, you can do something. And the fact that I went to a school where I was, in this class being the only white student, I felt comfortable, to be honest. I really did. And I regret that I did not go back for the second semester. I probably would have stayed in ROTC longer had this not happened. I really look back and I think, I made a mistake. But my point is this. We have to learn from each other, and learning history is a great way to do it. And we need to see the other differences. And this is part of what makes the United States a very rare and great nation. And what I want to do through this is help people see that. I want people to see the lesser known history that's going to make them realize, like, oh my gosh, there's stuff that I'm learning here that I wouldn't have taken an interest in otherwise. But Samuel Chapman's dream was to see these people succeed, to see these people put food on their table, to see people do something with their lives and have a life that had hope. And I hope that through this channel and through this story, it gives you hope. Because look at what he did. I got to experience part of the result of his dream, nearly over 100 years later. And there was thousands of students at that school. There's thousands of students at that school now. There's thousands of these historically black colleges and other universities that saw a dream similar to this, and they're doing something with it. And my encouragement is, those of you who are watching, find something for yourself, a dream like this man had, to do something that's going to make a difference in their lives. Just as my dream is to use this channel to help make a difference in somebody's life also. I hope this wasn't too off point. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. We are going to have some other videos coming up. I definitely have 3 that deal with nuclear mishaps. But I'm also going to be throwing in some other bonus videos, so it's not going to be just about that. One of them is going to be about the Savannah Waving Girl. If anybody doesn't know this story, it's a wonderful story. And if you've never been to Savannah, I highly recommend it. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great day. Fair winds and following seas.